I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 29, and I finally did it. After 7 years of night classes while working full-time, I graduated with my business degree. When my sister's son Brandon destroyed my celebration cake at our family gathering, sneering, "Eat it off the ground. That's all your degree is worth anyway," something inside me broke. The room fell silent. My parents looked away uncomfortably. My sister Heather barely suppressed a smirk. In that moment, standing amid cake crumbs and shattered dreams, I realized this was the last time my family would ever treat me like I was worthless. Before I dive into what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members who tried to dim your light. Trust me, what I did next changed everything. My relationship with my sister Heather has been strained for as long as I can remember. 5 years older than me, she was always our parents' favorite. When we were kids, George and Rita Mitchell, my parents attended every one of Heather's dance recitals and soccer games, but somehow were too busy for my academic competitions. Even when I won the regional spelling bee in 6th grade, they only showed up for the last 10 minutes because Heather had a minor cold they were concerned about. The pattern was clear. Heather was the golden child, and I was the afterthought. Despite this, I excelled in school. I was accepted to State University with a partial scholarship right after high school, the first Mitchell to attend college. I was so proud, but 3 months into my freshman year, my parents called with devastating news. Dad had been laid off, and they might lose the house. They didn't directly ask me to drop out, but the implication was clear. Family helps family, Cassandra. So I withdrew from classes, lost my scholarship, and moved back home to work 2 jobs supporting my parents. Meanwhile, Heather, who was 24 and fully employed as a real estate agent, contributed nothing. My parents never asked her to help because she was establishing her career. 6 months after I dropped out, Dad miraculously found a new job that paid even better than his previous one. By then, my scholarship was gone. When I brought up returning to school, my mother said, "Maybe college isn't for everyone, sweetie. You're such a hard worker, you don't need a fancy degree." Heather met Ryan Wilson a year later. Handsome, successful, and from a wealthy family, he was everything my parents wanted for their favorite daughter. They had a lavish wedding that my parents somehow afforded after claiming poverty when I needed tuition. I served as bridesmaid, smiling through gritted teeth as relatives asked when I'd follow my sister's successful path. Within 3 years, Heather had Brandon, followed by twin girls, Sophie and Emma. She quit her job to become a full-time mother, living in a beautiful suburban home Ryan provided. Meanwhile, I was working at an insurance company, slowly taking night classes with my own money to finally get my degree. Whenever I'd mention my progress in school at family dinners, Heather would cut in with something like, "That's nice, Cassie, but let me tell you about Brandon's baseball game." My parents would immediately turn their attention to her, leaving my achievements unacknowledged. Brandon grew up watching his mother dismiss me, so it's no surprise he treated me with the same disrespect. By 16, he was a mirror image of Heather's worst qualities, entitled arrogant and cruel, especially to me. The twins were different, quieter and kinder, often sneaking into the kitchen during family gatherings to talk with me about books and school. Despite everything, I persisted with my education. 7 long years of working full-time while taking night classes, studying on lunch breaks, and sacrificing any semblance of a social life. I didn't date. I barely maintained friendships. My one constant support was my best friend Maya, who'd been my rock since high school. When I finally completed my last class with an A, securing my business degree with honors, I cried for an hour in my car. I'd done it, despite every obstacle my family had placed in my path. The graduation ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday. When I called to invite my family, my mother sighed. "Do we really need to attend? It's just a community college ceremony, and Brandon has a scrimmage that morning. It's State University, Mom. I finished at the same school I started at, and it's my graduation after 7 years of work," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. After some back and forth, they grudgingly agreed to attend. Heather complained the entire time about having to arrange childcare for the twins, though Ryan offered to watch them. "No," she insisted. "This is a family event. We all need to be there for Cassie. Her tone made it clear this was a burden, not a celebration. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Walking across that stage in my cap and gown was the proudest moment of my life. I searched the audience and spotted Maya cheering wildly. My family sat several rows behind her, my parents looking bored and Heather on her phone. Brandon slouched in his seat. The very picture of teenage contempt. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come when we gathered at my parents' house afterward for what should have been a celebration. I arrived at my parents' house after the graduation ceremony, still riding the emotional high of achievement. Maya had hugged me fiercely before heading to her shift at the hospital, promising to call later to hear all about the family celebration. If only she'd stayed. Mom had set up a half-hearted attempt at decorations, a single congratulations banner that looked like it had been in storage since Heather's high school graduation 15 years ago. A small cake sat on the dining room table, white frosting with blue lettering that read, "Congrats, Cassie." At least they'd gotten my name right. "We're having pizza for dinner," Mom announced when I walked in. I didn't have time to cook with the ceremony and all. This from the woman who'd prepared a 3-course meal when Brandon made the junior varsity baseball team. I swallowed my disappointment and smiled. "Pizza sounds great. Thanks for doing this." Ryan was the only one who seemed genuinely happy for me. He gave me a warm hug and handed me a gift bag. "Congratulations, Cassie, we're proud of you." We felt like a stretch, given how Heather was pointedly ignoring me while arranging pizza on plates. Dad patted my shoulder awkwardly. "Good job, kiddo. Maybe now you can get a better position at the insurance company." Before I could respond, Brandon sauntered into the room, still wearing the sullen expression he'd had throughout the ceremony. He glanced at the cake, then at me. "Can we eat now?" he asked, no one in particular. "I'm missing Tyler's party for this." "We'll eat soon," Ryan said firmly. "Let's have a toast to Cassie first." Heather rolled her eyes but handed out plastic cups of sparkling cider. Ryan raised his cup. "To Cassie, for her perseverance and dedication. Completing your degree while working full-time is an amazing accomplishment." Here," my father mumbled. Just as we were about to drink, Brandon moved toward the table where the cake Saturday. What happened next seems to unfold in slow motion whenever I replay it in my mind. He looked directly at me, his eyes cold and challenging, then deliberately extended his arm and pushed the cake off the table. It landed with a sickening splat on the hardwood floor, blue frosting splattering like blood at a crime scene. The silence was immediate and absolute. We all stared at the destroyed cake, its "Congrats, Cassie" now a smeared blue mess on my mother's floor. Then Brandon spoke, his voice dripping with the contempt he'd learned from his mother. "Eat it off the ground. That's all your degree is worth anyway." I stood frozen, the plastic cup of cider trembling in my hand. In that moment, I saw not just Brandon, but the culmination of years of dismissal, undermining, and outright hostility from my family. The destroyed cake perfectly symbolized how they viewed my accomplishments, something to be ruined and diminished. My mother broke the silence first. "Brandon, that wasn't nice." Her rebuke was so mild it barely qualified as criticism. Heather stepped forward with a paper towel, sighing dramatically. "Boys will be boys. He's just having a bad day because he's missing his friend's party." She didn't make Brandon apologize or clean up his mess. I looked to my father, hoping for some support, but he was already heading to the kitchen. "I'll get the mop," was all he said. Ryan was the only one who reacted appropriately. "Brandon, that was completely unacceptable. Apologize to your aunt right now." Brandon shrugged, a smirk playing at his lips. "Sorry, the cake fell. Not sorry he pushed it. Not sorry for what he said." His non-apology hung in the air like a slap. "It's fine," I heard myself say, though it was anything but fine. "I'm not hungry anyway." "Don't make a scene, Cassandra," my mother whispered, as if I was the one causing problems. "It's just cake. We can still celebrate." I looked around at my so-called family Brandon's satisfied smirk, Heather's barely concealed amusement, my parents' discomfort at the disruption rather than the disrespect, and something inside me hardened into resolve. "I'm going home," I said quietly, gathering my purse and the gift from Ryan. "But we haven't had pizza," my mother protested weakly. "I'm sure Brandon's still hungry," I replied, heading for the door. No one tried to stop me. The drive to my apartment passed in a blur. Inside, I carefully hung up my graduation gown, placed my cap and diploma on my small dining table, and then sank to the floor and sobbed. Years of pent-up hurt poured out of me until I was empty. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Maya. "How was the family celebration?" she asked brightly. I told her everything. Those toxic gaslighting, Maya rarely cursed, but she made an exception that night. "Cassie, you know this isn't normal, right? This isn't how families are supposed to treat each other." "I know," I whispered. "So what are you going to do?" The question hung in the air. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that I had options beyond accepting my family's treatment. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm done letting them make me feel worthless." After hanging up, I sat at my tiny kitchen table, staring at my diploma in its leather folder. 7 years of sacrifice, determination, and hard work. I traced the gold-embossed letters of my name, remembering how it felt to walk across that stage. That night, I made a decision. The cake incident would be the last time my family undermined me. I wasn't sure exactly what steps I would take, but I knew with absolute certainty that something had to change, and that change would begin with me. Monday morning arrived with the usual barrage of texts. Mom wanted to confirm I was coming to family dinner on Wednesday. Heather sent a photo of the twins at their dance class, with no mention of Saturday's disaster. It was their typical approach, pretend nothing happened, and proceed as if everything was normal. Only this time, I wasn't playing along. I typed a simple response to my mother. "I won't be at dinner this week. I need some space." Her reply was immediate. "What do you mean?" "It's family dinner. Everyone comes to family dinner." For years, these Wednesday dinners had been mandatory Mitchell family gatherings, despite how miserable they made me. I'd dutifully appeared each week to be talked over, dismissed, and occasionally mocked. "Not anymore." "Not this week," I replied, then silenced my phone as it began ringing repeatedly. At work, I tried to focus on insurance claims, but my mind kept drifting to the cake incident. My coworker Alicia noticed my distraction during our lunch break. "Graduation blues?" she asked sympathetically. The letdown after a big achievement can be tough. I surprised myself by telling her everything: the years of being the family scapegoat, the cake, Brandon's cruel words. Alicia listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Cassie," she said when I finished, "that's not normal family dysfunction. That's emotional abuse." "Isn't that a bit dramatic?" I asked, though part of me recognized the truth in her words. "Would you call it dramatic if you saw someone treating their dog the way your family treats you?" she countered. "You deserve better. Have you considered therapy? Not because there's anything wrong with you," she added quickly, "but because a professional could help you navigate this and set healthy boundaries." That afternoon, I searched for therapists who specialized in family dynamics. I found Dr. Bennett, whose profile mentioned toxic family systems and healing from family scapegoating. I scheduled an appointment for Thursday. By evening, my phone had 17 missed calls and over 30 text messages. Mom had progressed from confusion to guilt tripping. "After all we've done for you, you can't spare one evening for family?" Dad had sent his first text in months. "Stop this childish sulking. Your mother is upset." Heather had taken a different approach, posting on social media. "So sad when people can't appreciate the family who's always supported them. Some people are just ungrateful." Family First thankless, several relatives had commented sympathetically, though none knew what had actually happened. I turned off notifications and made myself dinner in peace. Wednesday came, and for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing from work to my parents' house. Instead, I went to a bookstore, browsing without time pressure. I bought myself a novel and had coffee at an adjacent cafe, savoring the simple pleasure of an evening to myself. Thursday's session with Dr. Bennett was revelatory. I described my family dynamic, including the cake incident. "What you're describing is a classic family system with narcissistic patterns," she explained. "There's often a golden child and a scapegoat. Your sister was assigned the role of golden child, while you were cast as the scapegoat, the person blamed for family problems and whose achievements are minimized." "But why?" I asked. "What did I do wrong?" Nothing, she said firmly. These roles are assigned early and have nothing to do with your actual worth or behavior. Often, the scapegoat is actually the healthiest family member, the one who threatens the dysfunctional system by seeing through it. She helped me understand that my family's reaction to my boundaries wasn't about my actions but about their discomfort with changing dynamics. When you refuse to play your assigned role, it destabilizes the entire family system. Their negative reactions, guilt-tripping, anger, passive aggression, are attempts to force you back into the role they need you to play for their comfort. By the end of the session, we'd created a plan for establishing and maintaining boundaries. Dr. Bennett emphasized that I didn't need to make dramatic declarations or cut contact entirely if that didn't feel right. Small, consistent boundaries are often more effective than grand gestures, she advised. The key is maintaining them despite pressure. The weekend arrived with more family escalation. Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, called to lecture me about family loyalty. "Your poor mother is beside herself," she scolded. "After everything they've done for you, this is how you repay them? By skipping family dinner because of a little cake incident?" I took a deep breath, remembering Dr. Bennett's advice to stay calm but firm. "Aunt Linda, I appreciate your concern, but this is between my immediate family and me. I'm taking some space to process what happened." "Process what?" "Your nephew acted out a little. Teenagers do that. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." "I understand that's how you see it," I replied, "but I experienced it differently, and I need time." She huffed in frustration before hanging up. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. By Sunday night, a full week after the graduation disaster, I'd survived my first act of boundary setting. It wasn't easy, my stomach clenched each time my phone rang, and I'd had several moments of weakening resolve, my finger hovering over the phone to call Mom and apologize for overreacting. But I hadn't given in. For the first time in my life, I'd prioritized my own emotional well-being over my family's demands. It was a small step, but as I prepared for the week ahead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when thinking about my family. Pride in myself. 2 weeks after graduation, I was beginning to establish a new routine that didn't revolve around appeasing my family. I'd attended a second session with Dr. Bennett, joined a book club that met on Wednesday evenings, deliberately conflicting with family dinner, and started exploring job opportunities that might use my new business degree. Then came the escalation. I left work on Tuesday evening to find my car in the office parking lot with "loser" scratched deeply into the driver's side door. Security cameras had captured a teenage boy in a baseball cap performing the vandalism. His face mostly obscured, but his lanky frame and distinctive red sneakers unmistakably Brandon's. My hands shook as I called the police to file a report. The responding officer examined the footage and took notes. "Do you have any idea who might want to damage your property, ma'am?" I hesitated. The familiar family conditioning, "don't air dirty laundry, protect Brandon, avoid conflict," warring with my new resolve. "Yes," I finally said. "I believe it's my nephew, Brandon Wilson. This appears to be retaliation for setting boundaries with my family recently." The officer looked surprised. "Your nephew did this? Any particular reason?" I explained about the graduation incident and the family fallout. He shook his head sympathetically and completed the report. "We'll follow up with the parents," he assured me. Within an hour, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Heather was first, her voice shrill and accusatory. "How dare you file a police report against my son? Brandon would never do something like that. You're just trying to cause problems because you're jealous of my family." Before I could respond, she continued. "The police came to my house. Cassandra, do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? The neighbors saw. Ryan had to leave a business meeting. When I finally got a word in, I was calm but firm. The security footage clearly shows Brandon vandalizing my car. I have a right to report property damage. It's not him. You can barely see the person's face. You're just being vindictive because he accidentally knocked over your precious cake. Heather, he was wearing the red sneakers you bought him for his birthday. The same ones he posted about on Instagram last month. And it wasn't an accident. He deliberately pushed the cake off the table and told me to eat it off the floor." She hung up on me. My parents called next, their disapproval evident in every word. "Cassandra, you need to drop this right now," my father demanded. "Filing police reports against family members? What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that actions have consequences," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. "Brandon damaged my property. That's illegal. He's 16. This could affect his college applications, his whole future," Mom wailed. "Is that what you want? To ruin your nephew's life over a silly car scratch? What I want is for my family to respect me and my belongings. Brandon needs to learn that he can't destroy other people's property without consequences." "We'll pay for the repairs," Dad offered, his tone making it clear this was a magnanimous concession. "Just drop the police report." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to accept, to smooth things over as I'd always done. But Dr. Bennett's words came back to me. Boundaries without consequences are just suggestions. I appreciate the offer to pay for repairs, but I'm not dropping the report. Brandon needs to take responsibility for his actions. They were aghast. Dad threatened to reconsider our relationship if I persisted in this vendetta against my nephew. Mom cried about family loyalty. Neither expressed any concern about the damage to my car or recognized Brandon's behavior as problematic. The next blow came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Linda called to inform me that she had inside information about why my parents couldn't attend my graduation ceremony. They were helping Heather with a down payment for her family's vacation home in Florida, she revealed, clearly expecting this to shock me. "They didn't want to tell you because they knew you'd be hurt. They were giving her money instead of coming to your graduation. They were protecting your feelings." The betrayal stung, but it wasn't entirely surprising. I thanked Linda for her honesty, which confused her. She'd expected me to be devastated or angry, giving her juicy family drama to share. Instead, her revelation simply confirmed what I already suspected about my family's priorities. That evening, scrolling through job listings, I spotted an opening at Bennett & Hayes, a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago. The position aligned perfectly with my new business degree, offering substantially higher pay and advancement opportunities that didn't exist at the insurance company. The application deadline was approaching quickly. I spent hours perfecting my resume and cover letter, then submitted my application just before midnight. For the first time since the cake incident, I felt genuinely hopeful about my future, a future that might include physical distance from my toxic family dynamics. The next day, I shared the news with Maya and Alicia over lunch. Maya was enthusiastic but concerned. "Chicago? That's so far away. I'd miss you like crazy. But honestly, it might be exactly what you need right now." Alicia agreed. Distance can be healing when you're dealing with toxic family systems. Plus, it's an amazing career opportunity. "My brother Nathan lives in Chicago," Maya offered. "If you get an interview, he could help you find neighborhoods to check out. He's a real estate agent there." For the first time in weeks, I felt lightness in my chest. Change was possible. I didn't have to remain trapped in the same patterns that had defined my life for nearly 3 decades. The path forward was uncertain, but at least it was forward. The call from Bennett & Hayes came sooner than expected. Jennifer Mason, their HR director, sounded impressed with my application and wanted to schedule a video interview for the following week. I was elated, carefully preparing answers to potential questions and researching the company extensively. The interview went surprisingly well. Jennifer and the department head, David Kerrigan, seemed impressed with my responses and experience. When David mentioned they'd be contacting my references soon, including my current supervisor, I felt confident. My boss at the insurance company had always praised my work ethic and had been supportive of my educational goals. Maya's brother Nathan reached out, as promised, with information about Chicago neighborhoods that might suit my budget and preferences. He even sent links to apartment listings, mentioning one building where a unit would be available in the timing I'd need if I got the job. His kindness extended to someone he'd never even met was a sharp contrast to my family's behavior. 3 days after the interview, my phone rang with a Chicago area code. My heart raced as I answered, expecting good news from Jennifer. Instead, her voice was cool and professional. "Cassandra, I wanted to follow up regarding your application. We've encountered a situation with your references." My stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" We received a rather concerning call from Susan Peterson at Midwest Insurance. She indicated there have been issues with your performance and attendance recently. She specifically mentioned concerns about your ability to handle the workload and pressures of a position like ours. I froze in confusion. Susan Peterson? There's no Susan Peterson at my company. My supervisor is James Miller, and he's always given me excellent reviews. There was an awkward pause. The woman specifically identified herself as your direct supervisor. She had details about your work history that seemed legitimate. This is impossible, I said, my mind racing. James has been my only supervisor for 5 years. I can give you his direct number right now. After a tense conversation, Jennifer agreed to speak with James, but the damage had been done. The doubt had been planted. And I could hear it in her voice. They were reconsidering my candidacy. As I hung up, a horrible suspicion formed. Only my family knew I'd applied for this job. I'd mentioned it during a brief conversation with my mother, downplaying it as a long shot when she'd asked why I was dressed up for the video interview. I called James immediately, explaining the situation. He was as confused and concerned as I was, promising to speak with Jennifer and clarify that no Susan Peterson worked at our company and that my performance had been exemplary. Then I did something I'd never done before. I drove directly to Heather's house without calling first. It was time for a confrontation. I arrived to find Heather's minivan in the driveway, alongside Ryan's SUV. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. Ryan answered, looking surprised to see me. "Cassie, hi, we weren't expecting you. I need to speak with Heather," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Is she home?" He nodded, stepping aside to let me in. "She's in the kitchen. Is everything okay?" I didn't answer, walking directly to the kitchen where Heather was preparing dinner. She looked up, annoyance flashing across her face. "What are you doing here, Cassandra?" "We're about to have dinner." I cut straight to the point. "Did you call Bennett and Hayes pretending to be my supervisor? Did you try to sabotage my job opportunity?" Her expression flickered just momentarily before settling into indignation, but it was enough confirmation. "What are you talking about? I don't even know what Bennett and Hayes is." "It's the company in Chicago I interviewed with. Someone called them pretending to be my supervisor, giving a negative reference. Someone who knew details about my work history." Ryan had followed me into the kitchen and was watching the exchange with growing concern. "Heather, what's going on?" Heather's face flushed. "Nothing. Cassie's being paranoid as usual." "I didn't call anyone." The caller identified herself as Susan Peterson, I continued, "which is interesting, because that's the name of the character you played in your high school production of Our Town, the one you still have the program framed for in your office." The color drained from Heather's face. Ryan looked between us. "Heather, tell me you didn't do this." Her defense crumbled instantly. To my shock, tears welled in her eyes. "You can't move to Chicago," she blurted. "You can't leave." "Why would you care if I leave?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You've made it clear you don't even like having me around." "Because I need you here," she cried, her voice breaking. "Who will help with the kids when mom and dad can't? Who will I look better than if you're successful somewhere else? You're supposed to be the failure, Cassie. That's your role." The naked honesty of her admission stunned both Ryan and me into silence. For perhaps the first time in her life, Heather had articulated the exact dynamic of our relationship without any pretense. Ryan looked horrified. "Heather, listen to yourself. Do you hear what you're saying?" She seemed to realize her mistake, quickly switching tactics. "I didn't mean it like that. I just mean, we're family. We should stay close to family. The family that's belittled me at every turn? The family whose son vandalized my car? The family who couldn't even let me have one day of celebration without ruining it?" My voice remained calm despite the storm inside me. Ryan turned to me. "Cassie, I am so sorry. I had no idea she would do something like this." He looked genuinely ashamed. "I'll call this company myself and clarify that whatever they heard was false. I'll write you a character reference too, if that would help." Heather gaped at him. "Ryan, you're taking her side?" "This isn't about sides," he said firmly. "What you did was wrong, Heather. Morally and possibly legally wrong. You tried to interfere with Cassie's livelihood. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for Heather. She looked lost, her carefully constructed world one where she was always right, always superior crumbling around her. "I think you should go," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. I nodded, having said what I came to say. At the door, Ryan handed me his business card with his personal number written on the back. "Call me with the contact information for that company. I'll make this right," he promised. Then, more quietly, "And, Cassie? For what it's worth, I've always thought you deserved better from this family." Driving home, I called Jennifer at Bennett and Hayes, explaining that someone had impersonated my supervisor and that both my actual boss and my brother-in-law would be reaching out to correct the record. She seemed skeptical but agreed to keep my application active pending verification. The confrontation with Heather had been painful but clarifying. There was no longer any doubt about the dynamics at play or the lengths to which my sister would go to keep me in my assigned role. The question now was what to do with this knowledge and how to protect myself from further sabotage. The fallout from confronting Heather was swift and predictable. My parents called an emergency family meeting for the following Sunday, ostensibly to clear the air and heal the rift. I knew better, but agreed to attend, with Dr. Bennett's guidance on maintaining boundaries fresh in my mind. I arrived at my parents' house to find everyone already there. Mom and Dad seated at the dining room table, Heather dabbing at non-existent tears with a tissue, Ryan looking uncomfortable, and Brandon slouched in a chair, scowling. The twins, Sophie and Emma, had been sent to a neighbor's house, the first clue this wasn't really about healing anything. "Cassandra," my mother began as soon as I sat down, "this has gone far enough. Your behavior is tearing this family apart." I blinked in disbelief. "My behavior?" "Yes, your behavior," Dad interjected. "First, you overreact about a silly cake incident. Then you file police reports against your own nephew. And now you're accusing your sister of sabotaging your job prospects. When will it end?" I took a deep breath, remembering Dr. Bennett's advice to speak clearly and stick to facts. I didn't overreact about the cake. Brandon deliberately destroyed something meaningful to me and told me to eat it off the ground. I filed a police report because my car was vandalized, which is a crime regardless of who did it. And I didn't accuse Heather of anything. She admitted to impersonating my supervisor. "I did not!" Heather protested, her eyes darting to Ryan. "Yes, you did," Ryan said quietly. "I was there, Heather. You said Cassie was supposed to be the failure." Heather's face contorted with rage. "So you're taking her side? After everything I've done for this family?" My mother reached over to pat Heather's hand. "No one's taking sides, dear. We just want peace in the family again." "Cassandra," she turned to me, her expression hardening slightly. "Can't you just let these things go? For the sake of harmony? Why is it always my responsibility to maintain harmony by accepting mistreatment?" I asked. "Why doesn't Brandon have to apologize sincerely for destroying my graduation cake? Why doesn't Heather have to apologize for trying to ruin my career opportunity? Why is it always me who has to forgive and forget?" "Because you're stronger," Mom said, as if this explained everything. "Heather is more sensitive. She needs more support. And Brandon is just a boy," Dad added. "Boys make mistakes. He's 16, not 6, I countered. "Old enough to know better, old enough to face consequences." Brandon smirked at this, clearly confident in his immunity from meaningful discipline. Ryan cleared his throat. "I think Cassie has a point. We haven't been fair to her. The cake incident was deliberate and cruel, and Brandon should apologize properly." Brandon's smirk vanished. Mom said I didn't have to. All eyes turned to Heather, who flushed. I just meant you'd already said sorry at the time." "No, he didn't," I said firmly. "He said sorry the cake fell, not sorry for pushing it or for what he said afterward." "Why are you making such a big deal about a stupid cake?" Heather suddenly shouted, her composure cracking. "It's just cake. Meanwhile, you're trying to destroy my son's future with police reports and move halfway across the country just to hurt me." "This isn't about you, Heather," I said, maintaining my calm. "This is about me finally standing up for myself after years of being undermined and disrespected. I'm not moving to Chicago to hurt you. I'm pursuing a career opportunity that could be life-changing for me." "But why do you need to change your life?" Mom interjected. Your life here is perfectly fine. Is it? I asked. I've spent years being treated like I don't matter in this family. My achievements are dismissed. My boundaries are ignored. And apparently, it's acceptable for family members to destroy my property and sabotage my career opportunities. Dad slammed his hand on the table. That's ridiculous. We've always supported you. Really? Then why did you give Heather money for a vacation home down payment instead of attending my graduation ceremony? The room fell silent. My parents exchanged guilty glances. Who told you that? Mom finally asked. Does it matter? Is it true? Dad sighed. We didn't want to hurt your feelings. Heather needed the money for the down payment, and the closing date couldn't be changed. But my graduation date couldn't be changed either, I pointed out. You chose to prioritize Heather's vacation home over an event that was monumentally important to me after 7 years of hard work. Heather has 3 children to think about, Mom said defensively. They need space to grow, and I needed parents who showed up for me. Just once. The conversation continued in circles, with my parents consistently defending Heather and minimizing my concerns. When I presented clear evidence of patterns of favoritism, they either denied it outright or justified it with Heather needs more support or that's different. Finally, Heather exploded. You've always been jealous of me, just because you got better grades and teachers liked you. Some of us weren't good at school, Cassandra. Some of us needed extra encouragement. I needed encouragement too, I said quietly. But I never got it. Not from this family. That's not true, Mom protested weakly. When I won the regional spelling bee, you showed up for the last 10 minutes. When I got my college acceptance letter, Dad said, don't get too excited, college is expensive. When I told you I was taking night classes to finish my degree, Heather changed the subject to Brandon's baseball team, and you all went along with it. Every achievement I've ever had has been minimized or ignored by this family. The room fell uncomfortably silent. Finally, Ryan spoke. She's right. I've seen it for years. I never said anything because it wasn't my place. But the pattern is undeniable. Heather rounded on him furiously. How dare you? After everything my parents have done for us? That's exactly the point, Heather, he replied steadily. Your parents have done everything for us. For you. But very little for Cassie. My father stood up abruptly. I think we've heard enough. Cassandra, if you want to believe you're some kind of victim here, that's your choice. But don't expect us to keep supporting you if you're going to attack your sister and turn her own husband against her. I didn't turn anyone against anyone, I said. I just finally spoke the truth instead of accepting the family fiction. Well, your truth is very hurtful, my mother said, her voice quavering. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Mom? Specifically, she opened and closed her mouth several times but couldn't seem to find an answer. As the meeting disintegrated, it became clear I'd become persona non grata in my family. My parents firmly sided with Heather. Brandon remained unrepentant, and only Ryan and, surprisingly, Emma, who called me later that evening, showed any support for my perspective. Aunt Cassie, Emma said when she called from her dad's phone, I saw what Brandon did to your cake. It was really mean, and I heard Mom on the phone pretending to be someone else. I just wanted you to know not everyone thinks you're wrong. Her small voice offering solidarity nearly broke me. Thank you, Emma. That means a lot to me. That night, as I processed the family meeting, I came dangerously close to giving in to calling my parents, apologizing for causing problems, and returning to my role as the family scapegoat. The familiar path of least resistance beckoned seductively. Instead, I called Dr. Bennett for an emergency session. Her calm perspective helped me see that what had happened, while painful, was a predictable response to challenging an entrenched family system. They're fighting hard to maintain the status quo because your growth threatens the entire system they've built, she explained. Stay strong, Cassandra. This backlash doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're breaking free. Her words gave me the strength to continue forward, even as my family's narrative portrayed me as the villain who was breaking up the family out of jealousy and spite. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, I could envision a life beyond the limitations of my family's dysfunction. The following week, Bennett and Hayes called with good news. The job was still mine if I wanted it. My supervisor, James, had cleared up the false reference, and Ryan had sent a glowing character recommendation that apparently impressed the executives. They needed my decision within 10 days. I was elated but cautious. After what had happened with Heather, I decided to keep the offer to myself, sharing it only with Maya, Alicia, and Dr. Bennett. I began quietly researching the logistics of relocating to Chicago, with Nathan's continued help finding an affordable apartment. 4 days before I needed to give Bennett and Hayes my final answer, I came home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I called the police, waiting in the hallway until they arrived to clear the unit. The destruction inside left me speechless. My graduation diploma, which I'd finally framed and hung proudly on the wall, had been smashed. The document itself torn to shreds. The few graduation photos I'd printed were ripped apart. My laptop, which contained all my job documents, research on Chicago, and the acceptance letter from Bennett and Hayes had been stomped on. Its screen shattered and case cracked. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" the officer asked as he took photographs of the damage. I thought of Brandon immediately, but hesitated to accuse him without proof. "I've had some family conflicts recently," I said carefully, "but I can't say for sure." As the police documented the scene, my neighbor Mrs. Gonzalez knocked on the door. "I saw a young man near your apartment earlier," she told the officers. "Tall, teenage boy in a baseball cap. I thought he might be your relative, so I didn't think anything of it." "Did you happen to notice what time this was?" the officer asked. "Around 3:30. I was coming back from walking my dog." "Mrs. Gonzalez, do you have security cameras in the hallway?" I asked suddenly, remembering she'd mentioned installing one after a package theft. She brightened. "Yes. I keep forgetting about it. It's one of those doorbell cameras that shows the hall." The footage was unmistakable. Brandon, in his baseball cap and red sneakers, checking my apartment door, then using what looked like a credit card to jimmy the lock, a trick I'd once witnessed him use to break into his own house when he'd forgotten his key. The police took the footage as evidence and asked if I wanted to press charges for breaking and entering and vandalism. This time, I didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely. What happened next revealed the full extent of my family's betrayal. When the police went to question Brandon, they discovered he had an alibi for 3:30 p.m. he had been at baseball practice, verified by his coach and teammates. The surveillance footage clearly showed Brandon, yet he couldn't have been in two places at once. The mystery was solved later that night when Ryan called me, his voice tight with anger and disappointment. "Cassie, I need to tell you something, and it's not easy." He paused, and I could hear him struggling to continue. "George and Rita, your parents, they drove Brandon to your apartment. They waited in the car while he broke in. They provided his alibi by telling his coach he had a doctor's appointment but would make the second half of practice. They timed it specifically so he could be seen at practice afterward. I felt physically ill." "How do you know this?" "Emma overheard them planning it. She told me because she was worried about what Brandon might do." I confronted Heather, who eventually admitted the whole thing. She claims they just wanted to teach you a lesson about family loyalty by destroying the diploma, that Brandon went overboard with the rest of the damage. I couldn't speak, the betrayal cutting too deep for words. "I'm so sorry, Cassie," Ryan continued. "I had no idea they would go this far. I've told Heather I want a separation. I can't be part of a family that would do something like this. The girls will stay with me for now." After we hung up, I sat in my damaged apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my achievements and possessions, and let the full reality sink in. My own parents had not only enabled but actively participated in the violation of my home. They had helped their grandson commit a crime against their daughter. The family I had tried so desperately to please for 29 years had conspired to hurt me in the most personal way possible. Something broke in me that night, not my spirit, but the chains of obligation and guilt that had bound me to a family that had never truly loved me as I deserved to be loved. I sat down at my broken laptop, using Maya's borrowed tablet instead, and wrote an email accepting the position at Bennett and Hayes. Then I called Maya. "I need help," I said simply. "Everything's gone. All my graduation stuff, my laptop, She arrived within the hour, Alicia in tow. They helped me salvage what could be saved and made lists of what needed to be replaced. "You're taking the Chicago job, right?" Maya asked as we swept up broken glass. "Yes. I just accepted it." "Good," Alicia said firmly. "You need a fresh start away from these people." As we worked, I received an email from my university. They would issue a replacement diploma for a small fee, expediting it given the circumstances. One small victory. Later that evening, Nathan called from Chicago. Maya told me what happened. "I'm so sorry, Cassie. Listen, I know we've never met in person, but I've got a spare room in my apartment. You're welcome to stay with me until you find your own place in Chicago. No pressure, just an option." His kindness from someone who knew me only through his sister's stories stood in stark contrast to the cruelty of my own flesh and blood. I accepted his offer gratefully. The next morning, I went to the police station to provide a full statement, including what Ryan had told me about my parents' involvement. The detective looked grim as he took notes. "We'll be questioning your parents," he assured me. "This is a serious matter. They helped a minor commit a crime." As I left the station, my phone rang with my father's number. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me needed to hear what he could possibly say to justify what they'd done. "Cassandra," he began without preamble, "the police just left our house." "What have you done?" "What have I done?" I repeated incredulously. "I reported a crime. You helped Brandon break into my apartment and destroy my possessions. We did no such thing. Brandon told us he was going to talk to you, that's all." "Dad, there's video footage of Brandon breaking in. Emma overheard you planning it." Heather admitted it to Ryan. A long silence followed. "You've turned everyone against us," he finally said, his voice cold. "Ryan's talking about separation. Emma won't speak to her grandmother. And now the police? Your own parents? You participated in a crime against your daughter, Dad. What did you expect would happen? We expected you to understand that family matters are handled within the family, not with police and moving across the country and turning husbands against wives." In that moment, I realized there was no reaching him, no reaching any of them. They would never see what they had done as wrong because in their minds, I didn't deserve the same consideration as other family members. I was the scapegoat, the one who absorbed all blame and required no protection or respect. "I've accepted a job in Chicago," I said quietly. "I'm leaving next week. I don't expect to be in contact with you, Mom, Heather, or Brandon for the foreseeable future." "You would abandon your family? After everything we've done for you?" The same refrain, with still no specifics. "What you've done for me recently is help destroy my property and violate my home. So, yes, I'm leaving. Goodbye, Dad." As I hung up, a weight lifted from my shoulders, the unbearable weight of trying to win the approval of people who were incapable of giving it. In its place settled a new, unfamiliar feeling. The calm certainty that I was finally making the right choice for myself, regardless of my family's opinions. The week following the break-in was a whirlwind of activity. Maya and Alicia took shifts helping me pack what remained of my belongings, while simultaneously preparing for my move to Chicago. Nathan had sent photos of his apartment and the room I'd be staying in, even adding a virtual tour to help me feel more comfortable with the arrangement. "I still can't believe what they did," Maya said as we carefully wrapped the few framed photos that had survived Brandon's rampage. "I mean, I knew your family was difficult, but this is criminal. Literally criminal," Alicia added, sealing a box of books. "Have you heard anything more from the police?" I nodded grimly. They questioned my parents separately. Dad maintained they just drove Brandon there to talk to me and had no idea he would break in. Mom apparently broke down crying and admitted more of the truth, that they knew Brandon was angry and wanted to destroy my diploma, but claimed they thought I wouldn't be home and he had a key. "That's still breaking and entering," Maya pointed out. "Exactly. Plus, the video clearly shows him forcing the lock." The detective said juvenile charges are being considered for Brandon, and my parents might face charges as accessories. The reality of pressing charges against my own family still felt surreal. But Dr. Bennett had helped me understand that allowing serious boundary violations to go unchallenged would only reinforce the toxic dynamics I was trying to escape. On Thursday, the university delivered my replacement diploma, Seeing my name on the crisp new document brought tears to my eyes, a reminder that my achievement was real, regardless of my family's attempts to diminish or destroy it. That same day, I received an unexpected visitor, Ryan, with Emma and Sophie. They stood awkwardly at my door, the twins looking around wide-eyed at the half-packed apartment. "We wanted to see you before you left," Ryan explained. "The girls made you something." Sophie shyly handed me a handmade card. Inside, both girls had written congratulations on my graduation and new job, along with careful drawings of Chicago landmarks they'd researched online. "This is beautiful," I said, genuinely touched. "Thank you both so much." Emma stepped forward hesitantly. "Are you really never coming back, Aunt Cassie?" I knelt to her level. "I'm moving to Chicago for my new job, but that doesn't mean we can't stay in touch. Your dad has my new number, and we can video chat." "Mom says you're abandoning the family," Sophie said quietly. Ryan winced. "Girls, why don't you check out the moving truck in the parking lot while I talk to your aunt?" Once they were out of earshot, he sighed heavily. "I'm sorry about that. Heather's been, well, not handling this well." "I can imagine," I said dryly. "The separation is proceeding. I've spoken with a lawyer." He looked exhausted, the stress of the situation etched in the new lines around his eyes. "I want you to know I fully support the charges against Brandon. He needs to understand there are consequences for his actions. Heather's enabling has gone too far." "Thank you, Ryan. That means a lot. I also brought this." He handed me a thumb drive. "I saved copies of all the family photos from over the years. I know Brandon destroyed yours, and I thought, well, despite everything, you might want these someday." His thoughtfulness nearly undid me. Here was a man who had married into the family, yet showed more genuine care than my blood relatives ever had. "How are my parents handling everything?" I asked, not sure why I still cared. Ryan hesitated. "Your father is furious, blaming everyone but himself. Your mother. I think reality is finally starting to sink in. She asked me yesterday if I thought you would ever forgive them." "And what did you tell her?" "The truth that some actions may be beyond forgiveness, and that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing harmful people back into your life anyway." As they were leaving, Emma hugged me tightly. "I'm going to miss you, Aunt Cassie. But I'm glad you're going somewhere. People are nice to you." Out of the mouths of babes, the next day brought another surprise. Nathan arrived from Chicago 2 days earlier than planned. "Thought you might need an extra hand with the moving," he explained with an easy smile that reminded me of Maya's. "Plus, I know a guy with a truck who gave us a better rate than the moving company you booked." With Nathan's help, the packing accelerated. He was practical, organized, and brought a calm efficiency to the chaos of my apartment. More importantly, he represented a future where relationships could be straightforward and kind, without the undercurrents of resentment and manipulation I'd grown up with. On Saturday, 3 days before my planned departure, I received a text from my mother asking to meet. After consulting with Dr. Bennett, I agreed to a brief meeting in a public coffee shop. Nathan offered to wait nearby, just in case. Mom looked smaller somehow, diminished by the events of the past weeks. She clutched her coffee cup like a lifeline. "Thank you for seeing me," she began hesitantly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. She nodded, accepting this. "I don't know where to start, Cassandra. Everything has fallen apart so quickly." "Not quickly, Mom. This has been building for years." The cake incident was just the tipping point. She stared into her coffee. "George and we always thought we were doing what was best for the family. Heather needed more attention, more support. You were always so capable, so independent." "I became independent because I had to be," I pointed out. "No one was supporting me. For perhaps the first time in my life, my mother really listened. I see that now. Or I'm starting to." When the police questioned us about the break-in, something clicked. I realized what we'd become, the kind of parents who would help their grandson commit a crime against their daughter. Her voice broke. "I'm so ashamed, Cassandra." "You should be," I said quietly. That was the moment I realized I had to leave completely. Not just set boundaries, but remove myself entirely. "Are the charges going forward?" "Yes. Brandon needs to face consequences, and so do you and Dad." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I understand. I've started seeing a therapist. George refuses to go. He says therapy is for weak people. That doesn't surprise me. I don't expect your forgiveness, she continued. I just wanted you to know that I'm finally seeing things clearly. Too late, but I'm trying to understand how we got here. As I watched my mother struggle with the reality of what our family had become, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Not because everything was resolved, it wasn't, and might never be, but because I was finally free of the desperate need for her approval and understanding. I was moving forward, regardless. I hope therapy helps you, Mom, I said sincerely. I hope you figure things out. But I need to focus on building my new life now. We parted with an awkward hug, neither of us sure what the future held for our relationship. As I watched her walk away, I realized I was saying goodbye not just to my mother, but to the fantasy that my family would ever be what I had needed them to be. Nathan was waiting at a nearby table, pretending to read a book. Everything okay? He asked. Yes, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Everything is finally okay. 6 months after moving to Chicago, I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching snowflakes drift lazily from a steel gray sky. The view of Lake Michigan in winter was spectacular, vast, and serene, so different from the cramped perspectives of my old life. Bennett and Hayes had proven to be everything I'd hoped for professionally. My business degree was being put to good use in the marketing department, where my ideas were not only heard but valued and implemented. For the first time in my career, I felt respected and appreciated. My temporary stay at Nathan's apartment had lasted only 2 weeks before I found my own place. But those 2 weeks had laid the foundation for what was becoming the most honest, healthy relationship I'd ever experienced. We'd started dating slowly and carefully, both of us aware of the significance of building something based on mutual respect rather than obligation or power dynamics. My weekly video sessions with Dr. Bennett continued, though now focused less on survival strategies and more on long-term healing. You're doing remarkably well, she'd observed in our last session. How does it feel to be 6 months removed from the family situation? Like I can finally breathe, I'd told her. Like I've been swimming underwater my whole life, and now I've broken the surface. The transition hadn't been without challenges. There were nights I'd woken from nightmares about the break-in, moments of doubt when the old conditioning resurfaced. Was I overreacting? Should I call and make amends? Was I the problem all along? But these moments grew fewer and further between as my new life took shape around me. The legal consequences for my family had proceeded as expected. Brandon had been assigned to a juvenile diversion program, including mandatory counseling and community service. My parents had faced charges as accessories, eventually accepting a plea deal that included probation and restitution payments for the damaged property. I'd received a formal letter of apology from Brandon as part of his program requirements, stilted and clearly written under supervision, but an apology nonetheless. My most consistent family contact had been with Ryan, who called monthly with updates about the girls. He and Heather were in marriage counseling, though he remained skeptical about long-term reconciliation. She's trying, he reported, but she still doesn't fully accept responsibility for her actions. The therapist says her narcissistic tendencies are deeply ingrained. Sophie and Emma had visited over Thanksgiving break, Ryan bringing them to Chicago for a long weekend, showing them around the city, watching their excitement at the simple pleasure of riding the L train, had been a joy I hadn't anticipated. Mom says you're not really part of the family anymore, Sophie had confided during their visit, but Dad says family is more than just who you're related to, it's who treats you with love and respect. Ryan's wisdom had struck a chord. My chosen family had expanded in Chicago, colleagues who'd become friends, neighbors who checked in during bad weather, Maya and Alicia who visited monthly, and Nathan, whose steadfast support never wavered. The most surprising development had been a tentative reconciliation with my mother. The initial coffee shop meeting had led to occasional phone calls, which gradually became more honest conversations. Rita had continued therapy despite my father's disapproval and had begun to recognize the toxic patterns in her behavior and the family system she'd helped create. I'm reading about family scapegoating, she'd told me in our last call. It's like someone wrote a book about our family. I never realized. I never wanted to see what we were doing to you. Her growth gave me hope, though I maintained careful boundaries. We spoke twice a month, focusing on the present rather than rehashing past hurts. She respected my decision to keep distance from my father and Heather, both of whom remained entrenched in their perspectives. Heather had attempted contact once, sending a text that read, "I hope you're happy ruining our family." I hadn't responded. Some relationships, I'd learned, couldn't be salvaged, and that was okay. As I turned from the window, my phone pinged with a message from Nathan. "Still on for dinner with Maya and Alicia tonight?" They just arrived at my place. I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. The sound of my own laughter still sometimes startled me. The free, uninhibited joy that had been so rare in my previous life now flowed more readily. My new apartment was modestly furnished but distinctly mine. On the wall hung my replaced diploma, now properly framed and displayed prominently. Beside it was a photo from my first day at Bennett and Hayes, and another of Nathan, Maya, Alicia, and me at Thanksgiving. There were no family photos from my childhood, not because I discarded that history, but because I was selective about the memories I chose to surround myself with daily. The journey from that devastating moment with the graduation cake to this peaceful Chicago evening hadn't been easy. There had been legal battles, tearful therapy sessions, nights of doubt, and the difficult process of building a life from scratch in a new city. But standing in my apartment, watching the snow fall on a city that had welcomed me, I felt a profound gratitude for that pivotal moment of clarity when Brandon had told me to eat it off the ground. In that moment, I'd finally seen the truth of my family dynamic with perfect clarity. Their cruelty had ultimately been the catalyst for my freedom. The cake meant to celebrate my achievement had instead marked the beginning of my true graduation into a life of self-respect, healthy boundaries, and authentic connections. As I prepared to meet Nathan, Maya, and Alicia for dinner, I realized that the most important lesson I'd learned wasn't about family loyalty or cutting toxic people out of your life. It was simpler than that. We teach people how to treat us by what we accept, what we tolerate, and what we reinforce. For 29 years, I'd taught my family that disrespect and cruelty were acceptable. When I finally changed that lesson, everything else had changed too. Some people might never understand why I'd pressed charges against my own family or moved hundreds of miles away. But I understood, and that was enough. The girl who would have eaten cake off the ground to keep the peace was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth and refused to settle for less than she deserved. I grabbed my coat and headed out into the snowy evening, toward the warmth of people who genuinely cared for me, my chosen family, the one I'd built from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and self-respect? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand up for yourself when it matters most.